Commander Lee Hanna stood in the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the holographic star map flicker with red warning lights. 3 entire star systems had gone dark in the past week. The silence from those regions was more terrifying than any distress call could have been. The bridge hummed with nervous energy as her crew monitored incoming transmissions. Most were fragments, broken messages cut short by static or worse. But one signal kept repeating, growing stronger as they approached the Outer Rim territories. "Commander, we're getting a clear transmission from the Zephyrian homeworld," announced Lieutenant Kim Sora, her fingers dancing across the communication console. It's not good." The main display shifted to show a crystalline being, its translucent blue skin fractured with stress marks. The creature's normally melodic voice cracked with pure terror as it spoke directly into the camera. "This is Elder Veishi of the Zephyrian High Council. If anyone receives this message, please, we are dying." The Vorthok came without warning. "They consumed Talani Prime in 6 hours. Billions of souls. ... Gone. Our defense fleets lasted minutes against their ships." The transmission flickered, showing glimpses of massive dark vessels descending on peaceful cities. Hannah watched alien families running in panic as something enormous stalked them through crystal corridors. "Our weapons cannot penetrate their hulls. Our shields collapse under their first attack. They do not seek territory or resources. They hunt us for pleasure, consuming our people while they still live. The Korathene Empire fell yesterday. The Melody Federation is under siege. We estimate 72 hours before they reach our core worlds." Captain Park Gino stepped beside Hannah, his weathered face reflecting years of combat experience. His prosthetic arm, a souvenir from the Titan colony uprising, whirred softly as he adjusted his uniform. "Never seen anything like this, Commander," he said quietly. 60 billion people across 3 systems just ... gone. The Galactic Council's emergency session lasted 12 minutes before they voted to evacuate their core worlds. Hannah's jaw tightened. She remembered the last council meeting humans had been permitted to attend. The Altarian ambassador had stood before the assembly, his 4 arms gesturing dramatically as he denounced humanity's barbaric nature. Vote to exclude humans from council protection treaties had been unanimous. Deathworlders, they had called them. Too violent for civilized space. The Zephyrian transmission continued, the Elder's voice breaking completely. "We know most species. Consider us weak. Our worlds are peaceful gardens where conflict died out millennia ago. We bred war from our nature because we believed intelligence meant leaving violence behind. We were wrong. Please, if anyone listening has the power to fight these monsters, ... help us. We offer everything we have. Our technology, our resources, our eternal gratitude. Just please, do not let us die like this." The signal cut to static, then repeated from the beginning. And I had heard it 17 times now. Each playback felt like watching a civilization's final breath. "Status report on the Vorthok," she ordered. Tactical Officer Yu Sang-hoon pulled up intelligence files on his screen. Based on recovered data from destroyed ships, they're massive, single vessels the size of our space stations. Estimated crew of 10,000 per ship. They use some kind of biomechanical technology. Their ships actually grow rather than being built. Weapons? Plasma cannons that can crack a planet's crust. Some kind of energy-draining system that literally sucks power from enemy ships. Boarding pods that punch through any known hull material. Sang-hoon paused, his face pale. "Sir, they don't take prisoners. Intelligence suggests they consume their prey while hunting for the next target." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of ship systems and the repeated Zephyrian plea. Hannah studied the tactical data, her mind racing through scenarios. Every simulation ended the same way: total annihilation of any force foolish enough to engage the Vorthok directly. "Commander, incoming priority transmission from Earth Command," Kim Sora announced. "Admiral Chen requests immediate conference." The main display shifted to show Admiral Chen Do-yeon in his Seoul headquarters office. Behind him, Earth's blue marble turned slowly, peaceful and unaware of the horror consuming the galaxy's edge. "Commander, Lee, I assume you've monitored the situation in the Outer Rim. The Security Council has reached a decision. Its expression was unreadable. Deploy immediately to Zephyrian space with full tactical authority. Show these aliens what humans are. Capable of when someone threatens the innocent. Sir, our intel suggests suicide odds against Vorthok forces. Commander, those same aliens who called us monsters are now begging for salvation. Every civilized species in the galaxy is fleeing in terror, but we're not civilized, are we? We're Deathworlders. Crawled out of caves and fought saber-toothed. Tigers with sharpened sticks. We survived ice ages and asteroid impacts. We turned a hostile world into our home by refusing to surrender. The Admiral leaned forward. It's time to remind the galaxy why they feared us in the first place. Hannah felt a cold smile cross her face. Around the bridge, her crew straightened with anticipation rather than fear. These were humans who had chosen to serve in the deep void. Far from Earth's safety, they understood what it meant to face impossible odds. Tell the Admiral we're already en route, she said, her voice carrying across the bridge. And send a message to the Zephyrian homeworld. Tell them the Deathworlders are coming. The hyperspace tunnel collapsed behind them in a brilliant flash of blue light, and suddenly the human fleet found itself staring into the abyss. 12 ships hung in the darkness at the edge of Zephyrian space, their crews taking in the nightmare that awaited them. Captain Yoon, Taiho gripped the command chair of the destroyer Unbreakable as his sensors began painting the tactical display with red contacts, more red than he had ever seen in 20 years of military service. The Vorthok armada stretched across space like a plague of metal locusts, their biomechanical ships pulsing with organic energy. Contact count Ensign, he ordered, though part of him didn't want to know. Ensign Choi, Mina's hands trembled over her console. Sir, I'm reading 214 enemy vessels. They're arranged in hunting formations around the planet. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Each ship is. Registering as approximately 8 kilometers long, the bridge fell silent. Through the main viewport, he could see the closest Vorthok vessel with the naked eye, a massive, beetle-like construct that seemed to breathe as it moved through space. Its hull wasn't smooth metal like human ships, but a rippling mass of dark chitin that absorbed light like a hungry mouth. They're alive, whispered Navigation Officer Park Minsu. Those aren't ships, they're creatures. Major Kong Dewan strode onto the bridge, his combat armor already sealed in weapon checks. Complete. The scarred veteran had fought in every major human conflict for the past 15 years, from the Mars Rebellion to the Asteroid Pirate Wars. His laugh was harsh and humorless as he studied the tactical display. My grandfather used to tell me. Stories about hunting tigers in the Korean mountains, he said, checking his rifle's charge. Those cats were 3 times bigger than a man, with claws that could rip through steel. But they died just the same when you hit the right spots. He pointed at the display. Big doesn't mean invincible. It just means more target to hit. Below them, the crystal cities of Zephyria gleamed like jewels against the planet's blue surface. But even from this distance, they could see the dark scars where Vorthok ships had already begun their harvesting. Entire city districts had been carved away, leaving geometric wounds in the planet's skin. Commander Hannah, we're receiving a transmission. From the surface, reported Communications Officer Shin Bora, aboard the flagship Defiant. It's Elder Veishi. The crystalline being appeared on screen, her translucent form flickering with stress fractures. Behind her, other Zephyrians moved in panic as evacuation alarms wailed in their musical language. Brave humans, she said, her voice filled with desperate gratitude and terror. You came. I cannot believe you actually came. But please, you must flee while your ships still can. The Vorthok show no mercy to any who oppose them. They will consume your crews alive and add your ships to their hunting fleet. Commander Hannah's face appeared on every screen in the human fleet. Her expression was cold as winter on Earth's polar caps, but her eyes burned with something the aliens had never seen before, the fury of a protector facing a predator. Elder Veishi, this is Commander Lee Hannah of the United Earth Navy. We didn't travel across half the galaxy to run from a fight. We came here to hunt. The words sent a chill through every human crew member. They had trained for this moment their entire careers, the day when humanity would face something that truly threatened innocent life. Every drill, every simulation, every sleepless night. In deep space had been preparation for this exact scenario. On the planet's surface, millions of crystalline beings stopped their evacuation preparations to stare at their orbital displays. The tiny human fleet was actually advancing toward the Vorthok Armada. Elder Vaishai's voice cracked with disbelief. They're not retreating. The Deathworlders are actually attacking. The first Vorthok ship to detect the human approach was the Bone Crusher, a massive Predator-class vessel that had personally devoured the populations of 6 worlds. Its captain, a creature called Hivrender Keth, studied the approaching specks with amusement. 12 tiny ships, he clicked to his subordinates. Perhaps they carry tribute. Or maybe they seek quick death rather than slow consumption. Bone Crusher's plasma cannons began charging, energy crackling along biomechanical conduits that ran through the ship's living hull. When it fired, the blast was visible from the planet's surface, a lance of purple energy that could vaporize. A city block. But the human ships didn't cluster together like frightened prey. The moment the Vorthok opened fire, they scattered in 12 different directions like a pack of wolves breaking formation. The plasma beam struck empty space where the fleet had been just seconds before. Captain Yoon Taiho grinned as his destroyer rolled inverted, diving beneath the Vorthok ship's firing arc. All ships pattern Alpha 7. Remember your training. We're not here to trade shots with these things. We're here to cut them apart piece by piece. The Unbreakable screamed toward the alien vessel's underside, her fusion engines burning. At maximum power, behind her, 11 other ships took different attack vectors, each one targeting a specific section of the massive Predator. Fighter squadrons launched from the human carriers like angry hornets, their pilots whooping over the cum channels as they dove toward targets larger than space stations. Lieutenant Colonel Kim Soo-jen led the first wave, her fighter dancing between plasma bursts that could have incinerated her ship with a grazing hit. Fox 3, she called, launching her entire missile loadout at what sensors indicated might be a weapon cluster. The explosions were tiny against the Vorthok ship's bulk, but they struck home with surgical precision. On the surface, Zephyrians watched in stunned silence as the impossible unfolded above their world. The tiny human ships weren't just attacking, they were coordinating their assault like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Where other species saw hopeless odds, the Deathworlders saw opportunity. Each ship knows exactly what the others are doing, whispered Elder Vaishi. They move like a single organism, but with the cunning of 12 separate minds. The battle was just beginning, but already the galaxy was witnessing something unprecedented. For the first time since the Vorthok had begun their reign of terror, they had encountered prey that fought back with intelligence, coordination, and the savage determination of a species that had never learned the meaning of surrender. The massive Vorthok ship Flesh Render had never experienced anything like this in its 300 years of hunting. Its biomechanical hull shuddered as dozens of human fighters swarmed around it like a nest of angry hornets, their missiles striking with pinpoint accuracy at weapon nodes and sensor clusters. Inside the ship's nerve center, Hive Commander Zethkar watched his tactical displays with growing confusion. His prey was supposed to flee in terror, not coordinate attacks on his vessel's weak points. The small human craft moved with impossible precision, each pilot seeming to know exactly where the others would strike. They target our weapon systems. First, he clicked to his subordinates. How do they know where to hit? On the ship's outer hull, Captain M. Ji-hoon's fighter screamed through a gap in the alien defenses. His cockpit alarms were screaming warnings about the plasma fire all around him, but his voice remained deadly calm over the cum channel. Boarding party, this is Falcon Lead. I'm making my run on the primary hangar. Stay tight on my tail, and remember, once we're inside, there's no backup coming. Behind him, 12 more fighters followed in perfect formation. These weren't ordinary pilots, they were members of Earth's elite deep strike squadron, volunteers who specialized in impossible missions behind enemy lines. Each had trained for years in zero-gravity combat and close-quarters fighting. The Vorthok hangar bay was a nightmare of organic architecture, Fleshy walls pulsed with veins that carried nutrients to the living ship, while chitinous support beams flexed like insect legs. The atmosphere was thick and humid, filled with spores that made human eyes water. "Masks on, people," ordered Sergeant Ohijin as she led the first squad out of their landed fighter. Her voice was muffled by her combat helmet, but her tone was rock-steady. "Bio readings show the air is toxic to humans. Last thing we need is someone passing out in a firefight." The Marines moved through the alien corridors like ghosts, their training kicking in automatically. These passageways had been designed for creatures for meters tall, making the human soldiers feel like children exploring a giant's house. But that size difference was about to become their greatest advantage. Private Nam Young-ho took point, his motion detector showing multiple contacts ahead. The corridor curved around what looked like a massive organ, possibly the ship's heart, when the first Vorthok warrior appeared. The creature was a nightmare from humanity's darkest imagination. Standing over 4 meters tall, its body was covered in black chitin plates that reflected the dim organic lighting. 6 arms ended in razor-sharp claws, while its head was dominated by compound eyes that could track multiple targets simultaneously. When it spotted the humans, it released a shriek that would have paralyzed most galactic species with terror. "Contact front," Young-ho shouted, but instead of taking cover, he did something the Vorthok had never encountered before. Directly at the monster, the alien warrior's shriek of rage turned to confusion as the tiny human didn't flee. Instead, Young-ho slid between the creature's legs like a baseball player stealing second base, slapping a magnetic explosive charge onto its carapace as he passed. "Fire in the hole," he yelled, rolling behind a support beam as the charge detonated. The Vorthok warrior collapsed, its armored shell cracked open like an egg. "Move, move, move." Sergeant Ohijin led her squad deeper into the ship, following blueprints they had stolen from Galactic Council archives. The Vorthok used similar biomechanical designs across their fleet, which meant human intelligence knew exactly where to strike. Behind them, more fighters were landing in the hangar bay. Captain Im Ji-hoon coordinated the assault from his cockpit, marking targets on the tactical display as his sensors mapped the ship's interior. "Alpha Team, there's a cluster of what looks like power conduits 50 meters ahead of your position. Bravo Team, I'm seeing movement in the upper levels. Looks like reinforcements coming your way." The human assault teams moved with deadly efficiency. They had trained for this exact scenario in countless simulations, how to fight enemies larger and stronger than themselves in confined spaces. The answer was speed, coordination, and hitting targets the enemy couldn't defend. Corporal Lee Jae-on found himself face-to-face with 2 Vorthok warriors in a junction chamber. The aliens towered over him, their claws extending as they prepared to tear him apart. But Jae-on had grown up in Seoul's underground fighting circuits before joining the military. He knew how to fight dirty, instead of meeting them head-on. He threw a flashbang grenade at the ceiling and dove for cover. The explosion blinded the compound-eyed aliens. And while they thrashed around in confusion, he planted charges on the chamber's support beams and retreated. The explosion brought down half the corridor, trapping dozens of Vorthok reinforcements. On the other side of the rubble, on the planet's surface, billions of crystalline beings watched their orbital displays in absolute silence. Elder Vishi's body was fractured with stress patterns as she observed something that defied everything she knew about the universe. "They're inside the Vorthok ships," she whispered to her council. "The humans are actually fighting them in close combat." Other council members gathered around the display, their crystalline forms shimmering with disbelief. For centuries, the Zephyrians had heard stories about the terrifying Vorthok creatures, so deadly that entire fleets would surrender rather than face them in battle. Now they were watching a handful of humans systematically dismantling one of their ships from the inside. "Look at their movements," observed Science Elder Kathai. "They don't fight like other species. They don't try to overpower their enemies. They study them, find weaknesses, and exploit them." Above them, the space battle continued to rage. Human fighters darted between the massive Vorthok vessels like minnows, swimming around whales, but these minnows had teeth. Every pass left another alien weapon system destroyed, another sensor array blinded. The Vorthok had ruled through fear for so long that they had forgotten How to fight an enemy that refused to be intimidated? Their weapons were designed to terrorize, their tactics built around pursuing fleeing prey. But humans didn't run. They adapted, they learned, and they struck back twice as hard. Inside the flesh render, Sergeant O'Higgins's team reached the ship's central nervous system, a massive chamber filled with pulsing neural networks that controlled the vessel's movements. The sight was both beautiful and horrifying, like standing inside a living brain. "Jackpot," she whispered, pulling out a specialized virus bomb designed by Earth's best computer scientists. "Let's give this thing a migraine it'll never forget." The virus uploaded into the ship's neural network like a cancer, spreading through every system and turning the Vorthok vessel's own biology against itself. Within minutes, the mighty Predator ship was convulsing in space, its weapons firing randomly as its nervous system collapsed. On the surface, Eldervashi watched the impossible sight of a Vorthok ship dying in space, brought down not by superior firepower, but by the cunning and courage of creatures 1/4 its crew's size. "They're not just fighting," she realized, her voice filled with awe. "They're winning." It's a command chamber of the Vorthok flagship Soul Harvester. It's filled with clicking and chittering as panicked reports flooded in from across the hunting fleet. War Master Kethver, a creature so ancient that his black carapace bore scars from 1,000 conquered worlds, stood before the tactical display with something his species had never experienced before: genuine fear. Report from the Asterisk Flesh. "Render Asterisk," clicked Subcommander Yethri, his voice trembling. "The ship is ... dead. Its neural networks have been corrupted by some kind of technological virus. The human boarding parties have taken complete control." Kethver's compound eyes focused on the display, showing the flesh rendered drifting powerless. In space, its biomechanical systems shutting down one by one. In 3 centuries of hunting, he had never seen a Vorthok vessel fall to such a small force. "What of the Bone Crusher?" he demanded. "Destroyed, War Master." The humans used their fighters to target the ship's metabolic chambers. And when the life support failed, they boarded and eliminated the crew. Yethai paused, his carapace darkening with stress. "They're calling themselves Deathbringers on the communication channels." Across the fleet, Vorthok commanders were discovering that their usual hunting tactics were useless against these strange creatures from the death world called Earth. When they cornered a single human fighter, 3 more would appear from different vectors to rescue their packmate. When they managed to destroy a human ship, the crew would ram their damaged vessel into Vorthok weapon clusters before dying. "They fight like we do," whispered another sub-commander. "But their prey doesn't hunt back." Aboard the human command ship Defiant, Colonel Wang Minjin stood before a holographic battle display that showed the tide of combat turning in humanity's favor. His weathered face was calm, but his eyes burned with tactical intensity as he coordinated 12 ships against an armada of over 200. "Phoenix Squadron, break off your attack on the cruiser and support Eagle Wing. Raptor Group, I need you to screen the evacuation transports while they load Zephyrian refugees." The human fleet moved like a living organism, each ship knowing exactly where the others would be. Years of joint training and combat experience had forged them into something the galaxy had never seen: a military force that got stronger under pressure. Instead of breaking apart, Lieutenant Colonel Kim Sujin's voice crackled over the comm from her fighter squadron. "Colonel, we've identified a pattern in their ship movements. The Vorthok vessels are trying to maintain formation around their command ship, but they're leaving gaps in their defensive screen." "Exploit it," Wang Minjin ordered immediately. "Fighter wings, pattern Delta 7. Hit those gaps hard and fast." The human fighters dove into the Vorthok formation like sharks scenting blood. Each pilot had trained for years in zero-gravity combat, learning to think in 3 dimensions while pulling G-forces that would kill most alien species. They struck at weapon systems, sensor arrays, and engine clusters with surgical precision. Lieutenant Li Sua rolled her fighter through a barrage of plasma fire, her voice steady despite the chaos. Target locked on what looks like a communications array. Fox 2 away. Her missile struck home, silencing another Vorthok ship's ability to coordinate with its fleet. Across the battle zone, Dozens of similar strikes were isolating the alien vessels, turning their numerical advantage into a liability. On the Vorthok command ship, our Warmaster Kethfer was experiencing something no member of his species had felt in millennia: the terror of being hunted. The tactical display showed his fleet's formation falling apart as human. Fighters picked off ship after ship with impossible precision. "They know our weaknesses," he clicked in disbelief. "How do they know where to strike?" The answer was simple but terrifying: humans were natural pattern hunters. Their ancestors had survived on a world full of predators by learning to study their enemies and find vulnerabilities. What worked against saber-toothed tigers and cave bears also worked against biomechanical space monsters, Warmaster reported. His tactical officer were receiving retreat signals from 7 hunting groups. "The humans have destroyed or disabled 43 of our vessels." Kethber's mandibles clicked in rage and confusion. In 3 centuries of conquest, he had never ordered a retreat. The Vorthok were apex predators; they didn't run from prey. But as he watched another of his massive ships die under swarms of tiny human fighters, he realized the horrible truth. They weren't the predators anymore. "Signal the fleet," he commanded, his voice heavy with defeat. "We withdraw to the outer system. Prepare the Soul Harvester for retreat." The massive command ship, larger than a human space station, began to turn away from the planet. Its biomechanical hull rippled with stress as engines that could push moons began powering up for escape. On the planet's surface, Elder Vaishi watched the impossible sight through her orbital displays. The Vorthok fleet, the terror of a dozen star systems, was actually retreating from a handful of human ships. "They're running," she whispered, her crystalline form shimmering with amazement. "The hunters are fleeing from the hunted." Captain Park Gino, aboard the destroyer Unbreakable, had other plans. His ship had taken heavy damage in the fighting, hull breaches sealed with emergency patches. Half his weapons offline, and his crew running on pure adrenaline. But his voice was steady as granite when he opened the fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Park. The big one thinks it's going home to bring back more friends." His scarred face appeared on every human screen, eyes burning with determination. "I say we teach these monsters that when you threaten innocence, you don't get to walk away." The human fleet moved as one, battered ships pushing their engines beyond safe limits as they pursued the retreating Vorthok armada. Fighter squadrons that should have been exhausted found new energy, their pilots whooping over the coms as they realized they were actually winning. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy buildups from the Vorthok ships," reported Tactical Officer. "Yu Sanghoon, they're preparing to jump to hyperspace." "Not if we have anything to say about it," Wang Minjin replied coldly. "All fighters target their jump drives, whatever it takes." Lieutenant Li Sua's squadron screamed toward the Soul Harvester, dodging plasma fire that could vaporize them with a single hit. Her missiles struck the ship's hyperspace generator just as it began to activate, causing a cascade failure that rippled through the alien vessel's power grid. "Jump drive is down," she reported triumphantly. "The big bug isn't going anywhere." For the first time in their species' history, the Vorthok found themselves trapped and helpless, facing an enemy that refused to let them escape. The hunters had become the hunted, and they were about to learn what it meant to face humanity's wrath. In the depths of space, the tide of battle had turned completely. The predators who had terrorized the galaxy were about to discover that there was something far more dangerous than a monster. A protector defending the innocent, the asteroid field around Zephoria's second moon had become a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered dreams. Chunks of destroyed Vorthok ships drifted between the ancient rocks, their biomechanical hulls still twitching with dying nerve impulses. The Soul Harvester, once the terror of a dozen star systems, now limped through the debris field like a wounded beast seeking a place to die, Commander. Lee Hanna gripped the arms of her command chair as the Defiant rolled between 2 massive asteroids, her ship's hull scraping against stone that had been floating here since the birth of the solar system. Behind her, the battered remains of the human fleet followed in perfect formation. 8 ships where 12 had started, but still moving with the deadly coordination that had broken the Vorthok armada. "Hull breach on deck 7 sealed," reported Damage Control Officer Park Sumin, her her uniform torn and stained with coolant fluid. "We've lost main power to forward weapons, but backup systems are holding." Through the main viewport, the Soul Harvester loomed like a mountain of nightmare. The massive command ship was trying to use the asteroids as cover, but its size made stealth impossible. Plasma fire lanced out from its remaining weapons, turning ancient rocks into clouds of superheated dust. "All ships, this is Hannah," the commander broadcast to her fleet. "Final assault pattern. Remember what we're fighting for? Not just the Zephyrians, but every innocent species these monsters have terrorized." Captain Park Gino's voice crackled back from the Unbreakable, his destroyer missing half its forward section but still fighting. "Copy that, Commander. My ship's not pretty, but she'll hold together long enough to finish this." The human ship spread out through the asteroid field like wolves surrounding a cornered bear. Each captain knew their role without being told. Years of joint training had made them extensions of each other's minds. They moved between the floating rocks with impossible grace, using the asteroids as cover while closing in on their massive prey inside the Soul Harvester. War Master Kethfer stared at his tactical displays with the hollow eyes of defeat. Command chamber, once filled with the confident clicking of successful hunters, was now silent, except for the groans of a dying ship. Half his crew was dead, his weapons were failing, and these impossible humans just kept coming. "Status report," he commanded, though he already knew the answer would bring no comfort. 17 weapon clusters destroyed, reported his tactical officer, mandibles clicking with stress. "Main engines at 30% power, hull breaches on all levels, and sir, ... they're jamming our distress calls." For 300 years, Kethfer had been the apex predator of known space. He had personally devoured the populations of 60 worlds, turning entire civilizations into meals for his hunting fleet. The concept of surrender had never existed in his vocabulary, but as he watched the human ships closing in with the patience of true hunters, he finally understood what his prey had felt in those final moments before death. The terror, the helplessness, the desperate hope that somehow mercy might be possible. "Fire everything," he ordered, his voice hollow. "If we must die, let us die as hunters." The Soul Harvester's remaining weapons erupted in a final display. A fury, plasma beams and biomissiles filling space with deadly light, but the human ships danced between the fire like they were performing a deadly ballet, each pilot pushing their damaged craft beyond all reasonable limits. Lieutenant Colonel Kim Soo-jin's fighter squadron dove through the barrage, their engines screaming as they targeted the alien ship's sensor arrays. Phoenix lead to all fighters' final run on the command tower. Make this one count. Her missiles struck home, just as Captain Yoon, Tai-Ho's destroyer, unleashed its last torpedo salvo at the ship's main reactor complex. The explosions rippled through the Soul Harvester's biomechanical hull like dying heartbeats. On the bridge of the Defiant, communications officer Shinbora suddenly straightened at her console, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the Vorthok ship. It's not what we expected." The voice that came through the speakers was broken, speaking in halting standard that the aliens had learned from studying their victims. The proud clicks and chittering of the Vorthok language were replaced by something that sounded almost human desperation. Double quotes, "we." The transmission crackled through static and interference. "Please, ... mercy ... we yield to the Deathbringers." Human fleet stopped dead in space. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of ship systems and the distant crackle of dying energy fields. Commander Hannah stared at the massive alien vessel, its biomechanical hull flickering with failing lights. "Confirm that transmission," she ordered quietly. "Confirmed, sir," Shinbora replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Vorthok are surrendering." On the planet's surface, billions of crystalline beings watched their orbital displays in absolute silence. Elder Vaisha's body was fractured with emotion as she witnessed something that had never happened in recorded galactic history, the surrender of the Vorthok. "They did it," she whispered, her voice carrying across the silent council chamber. The humans actually defeated them across the galaxy. The news spread like wildfire. The Vorthok fleet that had terrorized known space for centuries had been broken by 12 human ships. Species that had fled in panic just days before now watched in awe as the barbaric Deathworlders accomplished what their combined fleets could never achieve. 6 months later, rebuilt Galactic Council chambers on Altair Prime hosted a ceremony that would be remembered for millennia. Ambassador Cho Eun-bi stood before the assembled representatives of 400 species, her dress uniform gleaming under the chamber's crystalline lights. The vote was called in the ancient way, each species announcing their decision in their native tongue. The result was unprecedented in Council history: unanimous acceptance of humanity into the galactic community. By the ancient laws and customs of this council, announced High Speaker Veltar of the Altarian delegation, we welcome humanity, not as supplicants or observers, but as protectors of the peace. Elder Vashi approached after the ceremony, her crystalline form now healed and shimmering with health. As Ephrian homeworld was rebuilding, its people no longer looking to the stars with fear, we called for mercy in our darkest hour, she said to Admiral Lee Hanna. The former commander had been promoted for her actions at Zephoria. The Deathworlders answered, "How can we ever repay such courage?" Hanna smiled, the expression transforming her scarred face. "You don't need to repay anything, Elder. Just remember that the next time someone calls for help, they don't have to face it alone. That's what allies are for." As the human delegation prepared to leave the council chambers, whispers followed them through the corridors. The galaxy had learned a truth that would echo through the ages. Sometimes the monsters you fear are exactly the heroes you need. The Vorthok survivors, imprisoned on a remote world under heavy guard, still clicked nervously when they heard the word human. They had learned too late that in a universe full of predators, there was something far more dangerous than a monster. There was a protector with nothing left to lose. The end.